Her party had 2 seats in the last House of Commons, but she's got big plans for both her party and the country during this campaign. Joining us now for more, here's Elizabeth May, Green Party candidate for Saanich Gulf Islands in British Columbia, and of course, the leader of the Green Party of Canada. And we are happy to welcome you back to TVO.
Not as happy as I am to be here. Thank you.
It's our pleasure. I want to ask, first of all, it's a bit of a sort of a technical, muddy political question, but this campaign is way longer than anything anybody's participated in living memory. And I wonder whether that hurts you more because presumably you have less money to spend than the other parties and therefore it's harder for you to compete. Is that true?
I actually think it's to our advantage because the strength of the Green Party is in our volunteer base. We need more time to knock on doors. We need more people. One of our candidates, Mary Lou Babineau in Fredericton, told me the other day that she has just hit her 10,000th door. She has literally knocked on 10,000 doors. Well, more time helps for those of us that want to actually, you have to buy new shoes a few times through the course of the campaign and try to speak directly to as many Canadians as possible.
And have you got a full slate nominated across the country?
We will in time for certainly by September 28th, when it's too late to put the names forward. We will have a full slate, minus 1 or 2 perhaps, but we'll be there.
The conventional wisdom is you won that leaders' debate that took place at the beginning of August. I've heard so many people say it. There was a lot of media commentary around that. But here's the thing, that was more than a month ago, and it was the summer doldrums, and a lot of people didn't see it, and I wonder if it happened too early to help you.
I don't really know, but I know that the leaders' debates, the conventional ones, goodness knows, where you moderated when I was in 2008, that was a huge plus for the party. That was the year when we got our highest voter turnout, our highest electoral results, even though we didn't win a seat. I think it definitely hurts us that the national televised debates are in some doubt because I'm included in those now. And I'm grateful that Maclean's magazine included me because these private one-off debates have no rules and are sort of a no man's land where there's some, I think, really disturbing trends in the way that Stephen Harper and Tom Mulcair will attend the ones that they choose that happen to be the ones I'm not in, other than the Maclean's debate.
So it's not a no man's land, it's more like a no woman's land.
Well put.
Kind of. I couldn't resist. Okay.
Perfect.
You've made it a point a few times out there, certainly at the end of the televised debate and then certainly in your kickoff speech as well. You've said, we're not the Green Party you think we used to be. We're not this one issue and that's all we're about. We're about so much more than that. So give me 1 or 2 or 3 issues here right now that people won't know traditionally are associated with the Green Party that you think they ought to know.
Well, we've always been a party about more than one issue, and we have 6 core green values that Green parties all around the world pay attention to, ascribe to, including social justice and human rights. In terms of our platform this time around, we're right now the party that's saying the most about healthcare. And we have a very complete platform that goes to looking at how do we incorporate alternative complementary medicine? What do we do to ensure the security and durability of our single-payer universal healthcare system, and take it to its next steps, which for us, right away is Pharmacare. Makes a lot of sense to have a national Pharmacare plan and bring down the cost of prescription drugs, as well as make sure everyone can afford them. Another one of our policies that people may not know about is our commitment to changing the way we make decisions in Canada. We're very excited about promoting a council of Canadian governments, because in the 21st century, we can't keep operating the way the Constitution structured us in 1867. We need to recognize the huge significance of the municipal order of government. So we want to bring to the same table federal, provincial, territorial, municipal, local governments, as well as First Nations, Métis, and Inuit.
You know, the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, does not like to sit down with other other levels of government because he says it turns into a big bun fight and everybody gangs up on the federal government and it achieves nothing. And there is some evidence to support that position. How would your council of the not council, what do you call it?
Yeah, Council of the Canadian
Council
Governments.
of Canadian Governments. How would that avoid that?
Well, we modeled it on something in Australia, the Council of, not surprisingly, the Council of Australian Governments. It seems to work there. I think there really isn't much evidence that it helps Canada to refuse to talk to the premiers. I think the evidence is very clear that dropping the health accord puts the sustainability of our healthcare system at risk. Refusing to talk to the provinces about coming up with an energy plan. I mean,
he talks to the provinces, Ms. May. He just doesn't talk to them all together in one table with the cameras on.
I don't think there's much evidence that we've had any effort to develop national goals or national strategies since Stephen Harper became Prime Minister 9 years ago. And it would certainly be to the benefit of Canadians to see all orders of government sit down, roll up their sleeves, and figure out how to work together in the same way that I want to in the House of Commons in a minority parliament, work across party lines. We work better when we work together.
Let me pick up on Pharmacare. Maybe we haven't had much talk about healthcare in general and Pharmacare in particular because it's a provincial jurisdictional issue. Quebec probably wouldn't participate in any national scheme. And have you talked to all the premiers about whether or not they'd be open to that kind of thing?
Look, I've talked to the Canadian Medical Association, I've talked to the experts there's a terrific report called Pharmacare 2020, Professor Steve Morgan at UBC, Daniel Martin here in Toronto, as well as experts from Harvard and around the world participated in that. It doesn't intrude on provincial jurisdiction to have a federal crown agency that negotiates directly head-to-head with the pharmaceutical industry and gets a bulk buying process that reduces the price. We're paying way more than we need to, and provinces don't have to buy the drugs through the federal Pharmacare Crown Corporation. They can go pay more if they want to, but I don't think they will.
Bill C-51.
Yes.
You're again it.
Yes.
You'd repeal it.
Yes.
Replace it with anything?
Let me say that that bill was tabled on January 30th. I was the first member of the House of Commons to condemn it the following Monday. It was tabled on a Friday. February 2nd, I stood up in the House, and I used the language that was used in a Globe and Mail editorial describing it as a secret police act, to howls of derision from the Conservative benches. That bill is simply the most anti-democratic and dangerous piece of legislation in our history. It certainly must be repealed. There are 5 separate sections to the bill. I know them intimately. There is nothing there worth saving, Steve. It should be repealed. If we need to amend our laws around removing propaganda from the internet, we can, but there's so much dangerous in that bill. It makes us less able to confront terrorist plots and threats. That's something that hasn't come across nearly clearly enough. The concerns in the RCMP, what happens when CSIS is able to disrupt plots without bothering to tell the RCMP what they're doing.
How about other pieces of legislation the Harper government has passed? What would be 1 or 2 on your hit list?
There are so many. Bill C-38, the omnibus budget bill, which, by the way, got rid of the only oversight we had for CSIS. This is before C-51, obviously, spring of 2012. Stephen Harper got rid of the Inspector General for CSIS in a bill of 440 pages that mostly took aim at environmental laws. A lot got pushed through that was never adequately studied. So, yes, bringing back our Fisheries Act, bringing back environmental assessment. Bill C-45 got rid of virtually everything in the Navigable Waters Protection Act. Bill C-36, responding to the Supreme Court decision on the sex trade workers, actually, I think is also unconstitutional. If you just look at the list of unconstitutional bills, let's save our legal system a lot of trouble and repeal the bills that are unconstitutional, which would include FATCA, for instance, the Foreign Accounts Tax Compliance Act. There's a very long list that we should repeal. And then we can start tabula rasa and go back to rebuilding our laws and bring them back, I would hope, even better than they were initially.
When you released your platform last week, you made it a point of saying we're not going to bribe Canadians with their own money in the way that the other parties have always done since Confederation ad nauseum. However, in the same announcement, you did talk about the Pharmacare rollout, which you just referred to. You talked about abolishing tuition for college and university. You talked about and skills training by the year 2020. You talked about eliminating taxes on incomes under $20,000 a year. How is that different from bribing people with their own money, which you so disparaged?
Stephen Harper's boutique tax cuts have never been recommended by any economist. Complicating the tax code with highly cynical, manipulative measures to appeal to certain voters but not others are not appropriate. I think they're, as I said, they're cynical. They basically are the product of low cunning as opposed to public policy. Every single measure we're proposing is for the good of Canada as a whole, for Canadians as a people, for all our communities and all our demographics.
So if it is a subsidy or a tax break or something like that that goes across the board, that's okay. If it targets a particular demographic, it's cynical?
I think it's extremely cynical to say to people, look, if you already have your kids in hockey, and I know you have your kids in hockey when they were younger, we're going to give you a tax break for that. But we're not going to ensure that, that every kid has access to sports and recreation. We want to talk about every kid, not just the kids of the people we think might vote for us.
Balancing the budget or not balancing the budget has become a bit of a thing in this campaign. Prime Minister Harper, Tom Mulcair both say, absolutely under virtually no circumstances short of a national disaster or calamity will they go into deficit. You know, Justin Trudeau has said they're going to run quote unquote modest deficits for the next few years to get some infrastructure built. What's the Green view on whether we should or should not have deficits in the short run for whatever reason?
We are, as a Green Party, it's on our on our website. Anyone can look up the details of our budgeting. We are running balanced budgets up to the year 2020 on our current assumptions and hoping the economy gets out of a recession through the plans we have to stimulate the economy. But if there were a deficit, a small deficit, you know, $1 or $2 billion in a deficit in a $2 trillion economy is not a big deal. We're concerned about debt. I think it's important to pay down debt. And I think a lot of fiscal conservatives would be amazed to realize that of our current $612 or $13 billion national debt, 24% of it was accumulated under Stephen Harper. So I think we should talk about debt.
In fairness, in response to the greatest economic calamity since the Great Depression, right?
And in fairness, in response to him not having any available money because he cut taxes, increased spending, and blew every surplus, while at the same time skewing our economy towards the oil sands and losing 400,000 manufacturing jobs before the 2008 financial crisis hit.
My turn to come back at you. And in fairness, because if he didn't do that, he would have lost power because the Liberals, New Democrats, and probably you too would have brought him down during those minority parliament years.
Well, he should have been brought down in the minority parliament years if the Liberals and the New Democrats had cared as much about Canada as they did about their own short-term partisan interests. They would never have let Stephen Harper form government at all.
Okay, so I hear you. Basically balanced budgets to the year 2020, but, you know, minor deficit if necessary in order to.
Yeah,
okay.
We're not planning to run a deficit. It's not ideological. Like, I wouldn't go hard at, you know, Justin Trudeau's plans involve a deficit. Well, he may be right. We need more stimulus spending. The Greens think we have enough stimulus spending for infrastructure by taking 1 point of GST, which is about $6.4 billion a year. But we do have a $350 billion infrastructure deficit. So you can take that. I think it's important to strive for balanced budgets. It's important to live within our means. But if our budgeting didn't get us out of a recession fast, we would need more stimulus spending.
You like the idea of legalizing marijuana, taxing it, and booking that money, eh?
Absolutely. Who wouldn't like that idea?
Well,
I suppose Stephen Harper.
I think he's already been on record as saying he's not going to do it.
Well, the prohibition policy doesn't work. It fuels organized crime. It distorts our criminal justice system, and it takes law enforcement officers off things that are far more important. While there's no, you know, you look at the World Health Organization, cannabis is no more dangerous. It can be dangerous just like tobacco or alcohol. So the case isn't there for prohibition. Meanwhile, legalization, regulation, and taxation happens to create a revenue stream to government. I wouldn't legalize it solely to get the revenue, but on a public policy basis, there's no argument for continuing prohibition.
Many times over the last several years, we've heard many parties, not the federal conservatives, but the other parties say, we love the CBC, we want to reinvest in CBC, we want to put more money into CBC, we're going to restore your home delivery for Canada Post as well, and this will all cost tens, if not hundreds of millions, and I'm not sure how you intend to pay for all that. How do you return these services that people may have already come to terms with the fact that they don't have anymore?
Well, seniors and people with disabilities have not come to terms with the idea that they have to climb over snowbanks to get to community mailboxes. The reality is that Canada Post is still profitable and can remain profitable into the future with a different business plan. The business plan we want to see is one that diversifies the services that Canada Post offers, as has been done in many countries around the world. The post offices offer banking, offer insurance, offer, you know, whether it's Wi-Fi or faxing. The Post Office of Israel offers 70 different services and is entirely profitable. The biggest bank in Japan is the Postal Bank. So we're not saying the public should bail out Canada Post to deliver mail to every door. We are saying Canada Post's business plan should include diversification of services. Because let's face it, in a lot of communities, commercial banks are withdrawing their branches. It's an ideal infrastructure that exists within Canada Post to provide services in communities that are losing them otherwise.
You'll notice we've been speaking for 15 minutes already, and we haven't even talked about the environment yet, because we now know that the Green Party is more than just the environment.
Yes.
But we will now.
Good.
Day one, Elizabeth May, in the House, post October 19th, the first environmental policy you will champion would be what?
Before the House even resumes, the day after the election, I'm not planning on taking any breaks. The Paris conference opens 40 days after our election. It's the deadline for a treaty. I've been the only opposition member of parliament to attend the international climate negotiations these last few years under majority conservative government, since Stephen Harper said opposition MPs weren't allowed on the government delegation. We have a heck of a lot of work to do to be prepared for that. We need new targets for Canada. We need a new proposal from Canada. We need to start reaching out across, globally to those countries that are like-minded, to let them know that Canada's back. We're ready to be not just a participant, a partner. We're ready to take lead. We want to work hard between the election and November 30th so that when Canada goes to those negotiations, I don't care who it is who's going to be Prime Minister, I want to go to work for Canada immediately to make sure that we're ready with the best diplomatic team, the best delegation, hit the ground running, and move those negotiations to a more ambitious conclusion than anything that's currently planned.
Would you agree both Tom Mulcair and Justin Trudeau would, just as likely as you, be capable of doing that?
No, I don't think they have a clue how to start. They haven't paid, no offense to them, they haven't paid any attention to the negotiations at all for years. They'll be great going there and giving a speech, which is so far what they both say they want to do. Mm-hmm. They both say they want to go there as Prime Minister and make a speech. It's going to fall pretty flat if you haven't done a whole lot of work between October 20th and November 30th. So that's where Greens are prepared to work hard. We have wonderful scientists running for us. Clara Martin, who's a national meteorologist, also used to work at the UN on climate. She knows what she's about. So does Lynn Quarmby, who's the head of the Department of Cellular Biology at Simon Fraser. So does Gord Miller, former Environment Commissioner for the province of Ontario. Actually, Gord Miller
running up in Guelph, I think.
Gord and I started talking about him running for the Green Party when we were both at the climate negotiations in Lima last December. We've been paying attention. This is a complex set of interlocking, interchangeable issues, 30 or 40 moving parts. We want Canada to be ready. We want to be in the lead. We want to save those negotiations from a mediocre papering over of disaster to avoid 2 degrees Celsius global average temperature increase. The whole world needs to do a whole lot more. And those negotiations need Canada back.
I'll do a little promo here. Gord Miller's coming on the program right after we're done. So
Great.
He will
Excellent.
He will add to that, I'm sure. Something in your platform I haven't seen in other party platforms. This quote, "I pledge to conduct myself with civility, to never heckle in the House." Why is that in your platform?
This is a pledge all candidates sign. They have to sign it before they run because we don't whip votes, and I can't insist on behavior after my MPs are elected. So we have asked every candidate to pledge to conduct themselves respectfully, to be fully transparent and accountable for any public funds to which we have access, and to make our constituents proud. That's the full pledge that Green Party members sign, and Bruce Heyer had a hard time when he became Green after sitting as an independent and previously being NDP, because suddenly he wasn't allowed to heckle. I said, Bruce, you just please, we don't do that. We're trying to restore civility to the House of Commons.
Now, when you say restore civility, that assumes it was ever there in the first place, and I'm not sure, I'm not trying to be a smartass, but
yeah.
'Twas ever thus.
No, not 'twas ever. I worked in Parliament. I wasn't a member of the Progressive Conservative Party at any time, but I was senior policy advisor to the Federal Minister of Environment when it was Tom McMillan in Brian Mulroney's administration. Parliament was far more civil. There was constant collaboration across party lines, and parliamentary committees had no partisanship at all.
There was also the Rat Pack and the bell ringing and all of that mishigas.
Guess why the Rat Pack was noticed? These days they wouldn't rise above the noise. Right? It was unusual behavior. I'm not saying there was uniform civility at all times, but the level of top-down control of MPs, treating them as completely interchangeable cardboard cutouts of the leader with a pre-recorded soundtrack emanating, might as well be a tape recorder on the back of their heads. It's not fair to smart people who run for office to allow them to become elected and then have the party boss tell them, this is what you do. You sit down, you shut up when you're told to, you vote this way, you do what you're told. And that's how it is in the Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, and the New Democratic Party. I think it's time for that kind of change, which is why Green Party MPs aren't whipped. But I want to know that they'll live up to a standard of excellence that will make their constituents proud.
Okay, you ready for some smart aleck questions?
Sure.
You're not going to be the Prime Minister after the 19th of October.
Oh, don't tell me that now. It's way too early to decide.
This just in. I know you don't want Stephen Harper. Does it matter to you who it is?
What matters is that we find a way to work together and set aside the hostilities of an election campaign once we convene in Parliament.
Do you have a preference if it's Mulcair or Trudeau?
It's all going to be about the math. How many seats do we have? How many seats do they have? In other words, it's up to Canadians. The way Canadians vote will be the cards that were dealt in a minority parliament.
How many seats do you reasonably have a hope of winning?
More than 12, and then we'll be in a position to be on the front benches in an opposition. We want to remain opposition, able to hold government to account. But if I could, I'd like to do some matchmaking to see if we couldn't get the NDP and Liberals into a coalition.
NDP, Liberals, Greens, all in a kind of a...
No, I'd like to be opposition.
Okay, help me understand this. How does this go?
Well, if you consider the last minority parliament we had that really worked, Lester B. Pearson, now it wasn't a coalition, but the small group of MPs, the smallest group in the House under Tommy Douglas, was able to have huge influence with a Liberal minority. Well, that's the parliament that brought in our health care plan, our entire healthcare system, Canada pension plan, unemployment insurance. It was a very productive, deliberative parliament in a minority. You know, we've had recent experiences of minorities that don't last more than a year or two, or sometimes three,
Well,
and
you could go back to '72, where Pierre Trudeau and David Lewis seemed to do okay.
They didn't do badly. David Lewis is leader as well. So what we're looking at is how can we be, I'd like to say cooperative, in other words, say, look, we won't bring you down on a confidence vote, but we don't need to be in your government. We'll make sure you don't lose or have your government fall, so long as we get rid of first past the post, repeal Bill C-51, have real climate action, and reduce the powers of the Prime Minister's office and restore the supremacy of Parliament.
I get all that, but right now the polls are so tight, anybody could win.
Right.
Which means if you actually do come back with 12 seats, you could be in a position to bargain for far more. Now, why wouldn't you say to whoever attempts to form a government, you'll have the support of our, let's make it up, 12 Green MPs if I'm the Environment Minister? Why wouldn't you do that?
Oh, because it's far too likely to go badly for whoever puts me in their cabinet. We have a lot of policies for which we are deeply committed. And I have a lot of friends around the world in Green parties who've been Environment Minister in a cabinet. Recently, for instance, the Green Party member of a coalition in the government of Finland had to resign when the government as a whole did something that violated Green Party policy. I think it's less disruptive to someone else's cabinet for Green members of Parliament to serve as loyal opposition, to hold their feet to the fire, and maybe one issue at a time continue to negotiate. Okay. I think it's a much better position than to be neutered and silenced because we're part of Team Mulcair or Team Trudeau. Not what I want at all.
Understood. Okay, I'm going to ask this anyway. Nobody wants to be judged by the worst 15 minutes that happened in public in their life when they have a whole history and a whole lifetime.
You mean my 7 minutes?
7 minutes,
yes.
Okay. There I go exaggerating again. But it's been said that if any of the other three major party leaders had a kind of, what do you want to call it?
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't say that's true at all. The press gallery dinner is a place for people to put themselves into uncomfortable positions to try to entertain a bunch of journalists who've had too much to drink. The reality is that Gilles Duceppe they threw buns at him.
Because he wasn't funny.
Well, the reality is I tried something that didn't work, and I don't think Canadians have taken it to heart at all. I don't think anyone thinks it's a big deal.
This is exactly what my question was going to be.
Okay.
The question was going to be, it seemed to disappear very quickly. We're talking about your appearance at the Parliamentary Press Gallery dinner. You tried to do a funny thing on Welcome Back, Kotter, the TV show versus Kotter, the prisoner, and it didn't go very well. It went away quickly, and I'm wondering if it went away quickly because
didn't seem to go away quickly to me, but I think I set the world record for apologies.
You did. You got out there right away and apologized. But I wonder if it went away as quickly as it did, in part because of the apology, and in part because people hold you to a lower bar than they would the other three major party leaders because they don't think you're as big a player as they are.
I don't think so. I actually don't think that. I think that the reaction was, I don't think that there's ever been a political party leader subjected to quite as much abuse. And there have been occasions when Mr. Mulcair might have been subjected to tougher questionings on things he's done or said, when the same could be said of Mr. Trudeau. Things said on the floor of the House of Commons as opposed to in an attempt at a joke skit. So I don't think I was subjected to a lower bar, not at all.
Last question. What will be the best thing for you about October 20th?
Going to get to work for the things that really matter, which is getting the toughest climate treaty. This is what really matters, right? Politics is important if it engages democracy. But in this election, what's at stake is really beyond politics and beyond, and actually, strangely enough, with this deadline for a climate negotiation for a new treaty looming, we have unprecedented events happening around the world, like the Pope addressing the United Nations to talk about climate, like Barack Obama taking a special summit to Alaska to talk about the shrinking Arctic. The only place the climate crisis is missing is in this election campaign, because we don't seem to be able to engage other leaders to talk about it. And for some reason, the media has decided that climate change isn't an election issue. It is the issue. And we need to ensure every way we can that we're ready. And that's why Green MPs will make all the difference in a minority parliament.
Ms. May, as I will say to all the leaders, we wish you well in the hustings, and thanks for visiting us at TVO tonight.
Thank you, Steve.
Green Party leader Elizabeth May.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.